Yippee-ki-yay! Howdy, y'all. It's Miss Taylor, and we are going to start vocabulary for day 10. We've got a root-tootin' awesome 12 words we're learning today, so get excited. Our first word is introductory sentence. You can find this word on page 5. It's at the very tippy top. An introductory sentence is the first sentence of a paragraph that gives background information and makes the reader interested. So remember, with our book club groups that we've been working on, when we talk about background, yes, that can be what's behind you, but when we're talking about background information, it's information, things that have happened before, in the past. So, the first sentence here gives some information from the past so the reader knows what is happening. Here's an example. Have you ever wondered how to clean your teeth? In my essay, I will explain to you the proper way to brush your teeth. Asking a question like this is a really good way to hook the reader, to get them interested right from the start. So this is an example of an introductory sentence. Now, think back to the introductory sentence in your essay that we just wrote. Finish this sentence to your partner. My introductory sentence was, so you're going to say this whole sentence and see what you can remember, either the sentence or what it was about. If you started with a question, finish the sentence. My introductory sentence was. Now, my little cowboys and cowgirls, turn to Thesis Statement on page 9. A thesis statement is at the beginning of an essay. It summarizes the claim or main idea of the paper. We also called this the claim. In our essay, we had claims. Here was my example. Jessie is very brave. That was my thesis statement. It was what the whole essay was about. I gave reasons for why she's brave. I gave explanations, but everything was about how she is brave. Now think back again to your essay. Finish the sentence to your partner. Remember, we say the entire sentence. The thesis statement of my essay was. Now please scoot on over to page 3 and find the word evidence. In the word evidence, there's no definition, but we have talked about this when writing our essays. We need to have evidence. So write down in your packet in the second column the definition of evidence. So here is my definition. An example to prove something. So this could be a crime scene, like maybe a woman died, and to find out who it was who killed her, you look for evidence. Like maybe a piece of evidence you found is a man's fingerprints were at her house. This example, the evidence is used to prove something. The evidence is used to prove that the man killed the woman. The fingerprints are the evidence that are used to prove this. Another example of evidence could be what we talked about in our essay writing. We found evidence to support our claim, or what we just learned about, our thesis, what our essay was about. So you decided what was the lesson in the book that I read, and then you found evidence to support this idea. So now, if you look in your third column next to evidence, you will see at the top it says evidence why Jessie is brave. So in your packet, give evidence for how we know Jessie is brave. Now we'll stay on the same page, page 3, and a little above you'll find direct quote. So a direct quote would be writing the exact words of the author or speaker. We learned speaker, someone who talks, author, someone who writes a book or some other piece of writing. So you are writing down the exact words of what they say. We have also talked about in quotations, we need to be sure to use quotation marks. Really important. Here's an example of a direct quote. He had never been to camp before, by Louis Sachar from Holes on page 6. This is exactly what they say in Holes on page 6, what the author says. So, even though a character didn't say this, the author said this, so it's still a quote. And since it's not my words, it's the author's words, I need to put it in quotation marks. Now, talk with your partner about why it is important that we use quotation marks around direct quotes. So you should have talked with your partner about how if you don't have quotation marks, you're cheating, you're copying. It's called plagiarism, and it is 100% against the law. It is not okay to copy something. You need to put it in your own words. But if you do use a direct quote, that's fine as long as you use quotation marks to show this isn't something that I came up with myself. It's something that the author or the speaker said already, and I'm just writing down what they said. So quotation marks are super, super, super important. Now, my lovely 6th graders, a little bit above that is the word detail on the same page, page 3. So the definition of detail is a small part of a larger whole. So let's look at my drawing of a desk. Wow, it's amazing how this drawing just appeared just like that. So on my drawing of the desk, I included many small details on top of the desk. For example, I have a lamp, a calculator, some candy, a wrapper with the candy on the desk. I have some homework with the title, vocab unit, a pencil. I have really small details on the desk. It's a small part. These are small parts of the larger whole. So I have included lots of little things in my picture to make it more detailed. So in the 3rd column, draw your own picture in the packet, including many details. Now, my friends, flip back to page 2 and find the word conclude. Conclude is to bring to an end or to form an opinion. So if you conclude an essay, you're bringing the essay to an end. You're finishing the essay. Or to form an opinion is another definition. Here's an example of forming an opinion. After watching Harry Potter, I conclude that Hermione is always there for her friends. So after watching Harry Potter, I form the opinion that Hermione is always there for her friends. Now finish this sentence to your partner. After having Miss Taylor as a teacher for 8 months, I conclude, so say the entire sentence, what opinion have you formed after having me as a teacher for 8 months? Now, right below that, you'll find the word conclusion. We've talked so much about conclusions this year. So right now, write down a definition of what you remember the definition of conclusion to be. So I would guess that your definition is like mine. A conclusion is the last paragraph of an essay or the end of a story. Let's draw a picture together to represent conclusion in the third column of your packet. Here's my picture. Here's my pretend essay. I have 5 paragraphs, and notice how each paragraph is indented. And my very last paragraph is the conclusion. Now go to the very top of page 7 and find the word proofread. So to proofread is to read again and fix mistakes. So what you are going to do in the third column of your packet is, here is a sentence. You're going to read it again and fix the mistakes. You're going to proofread the sentence in your packet, just like our sentence corrections that we have done. And here's what you should have. Capitalize the I, correct the spelling of happy, period at the end of the sentence. So now, when we are talking about fixing things in your essay, there's 2 words that we can use: editing and revising. So talk to your partner about what is the difference between editing and revising. So you may have talked about how editing is fixing little mistakes, like adding capital letters and periods, maybe changing spelling, adding commas, things like that, the little mistakes. Revising is when you maybe take out a paragraph, you add in a sentence, you move things around, you're changing the whole look of the essay. If you were looking at an essay from far away, the original and one that had been edited, it would look just about the same from really far away. If you were looking at an essay from really far away and you compared the original to one that you had revised, it would look different if you held them up side by side. From far away, they would look different. Because revising, you're totally changing what you're saying to make it better. Now, on the first page, find the word bias. A bias is an attitude that favors one way over another. In other words, it's an opinion. So a bias could show up in really any type of writing. It's any time that you're reading and you think to yourself, I think I know the author's opinion on this. Here's an example. It is really obvious in Mark's essay that he hates ice cream. There is a strong bias. So in his essay that he's writing about ice cream, it's really obvious that he does not like it. Maybe he uses words like, it was a mess, it was really gross and sticky, or that disgusting ice cream. Those types of words make it obvious that Mark hates ice cream. It really shows his opinion. So we are going to look at an example of an article, and after we're done reading it, you will answer this sentence to your partner. The bias in the article is toward, so you'll have to decide what is the author's opinion when we are reading. So here is the first example. 6th grade boy is a hero! On Tuesday, Sam Parks, a 6th grade student at Sunnyview Public School, was riding his bike home from school without a care in the world when he became the hero of the day. Mrs. Linwood's tabby cat Falco was stranded at the top of her giant fence. The cat was meowing and screaming like an injured lion. Sam could not ignore its screams, and without a thought for himself, Sam scaled the fence in one leap and carried the cat to safety. Mrs. Linwood thankfully hugged Sam as the cat gazed up at Sam in awe and appreciation. "That boy is a true hero," said Mrs. Linwood. "Without his assistance, my Falco would have been stuck on that fence until next winter." So there's one. Now here's the real story. Sam Parks, a 6th grade student at Sunnyview High School, was riding his bike home from school Tuesday. He heard a strange noise and discovered that Mrs. Linwood's tabby cat had gotten stuck up on the top of her 3-foot-high white picket fence. Sam walked over, reached up, and lifted the cat down to the ground. Mrs. Linwood thanked him for helping the cat named Falco. "What a helpful boy," she said to reporters. So now you are going to finish this sentence to your partner. So here's the real story. Thinking about the first one we read, there was a really obvious opinion from the author, what the author thought. So you're going to think about that first article we read and thinking, what was the author's opinion? What made that first one different than this one right here? Once you think you know, you will say this whole sentence to your partner. The bias in the first article is toward. So you might have said, the bias in the first article is toward the boy being a hero. Here's what might have happened. The author might have heard this story here, and this is just the facts. There's no opinion, it's just the facts. The author of the first article we read might have been reading this and thought to himself or herself, "Wow, this Sam kid is a hero," and then decided to write their own article, but the words that the author chose in the first one that we read definitely made Sam seem more like a hero. Like he's jumping up on the fence, risking his life. The woman, Mrs. Linwood, is so thankful. She says, "He is my hero." Just makes Sam sound like such an amazing kid. So it is clear that in the first article, the author had a bias toward the boy being a hero. It's obvious that the author's opinion is that Sam is a hero. Now we are going to page 5 and find main idea or main point. Now, based on what you have learned in the past and what these words mean, on your own, try to write a definition in your packet for this word. I bet yours looks something like this. What a story is mostly about. So, we're going to think now about running out of time. In your packet, you will finish this sentence. The main idea of running out of time is, so finish the sentence, what is running out of time mostly about? Now we are going to look at theme. This word is at the very, very top of page 9. Now we just wrote an entire essay about the theme of the book that you read. So I really hope you have an idea of what a theme is and write down the definition in your packet. Here is what you should have had. The lesson learned in a story. You wrote an essay all about the lesson that the character in your story learned. So you wrote an essay about the theme. If you don't have this in your packet, please write it down now in the second column. So think back to your essay. Finish the sentence in your packet. The theme of my book was... So you're going to write this entire sentence thinking about, what did I write my essay about? What lesson did they learn? you will write the theme of my book was, and then write that lesson. We have one more word left today. I know. Can you believe it? We're already at our last word for the day. The word we are going to look at is purpose. This is on page 7. So a purpose is the reason for doing something. So this would most likely come up on your math test when talking about the author's purpose. So there are 3 different purposes that the authors might have. So 3 reasons an author might have to write something. It could be to inform, to give information about something. It could be to persuade, to try to convince someone of something, or it could be to entertain, just to have fun reading. So inform, persuade, or entertain. Those are the 3 purposes an author might have for writing. So in the 3rd column, you will see the beginning of a sentence. It says, the author's purpose of writing our social studies textbook is... So why did the author write the social studies textbook that we use in class? Why do you think? Which one of these reasons? So you might have said the author's purpose of writing our social studies textbook is to inform, to give information. Or maybe you said something like this. The author's purpose of writing our social studies textbook is to teach about social studies. There's no examples in the textbook of the author trying to convince you to do something or think something. Maybe you're entertained by the textbook, but that's not the main reason why the author wrote it. The main reason is to teach you or to give you information. So to inform. Now that is the last word for the day. Now your job is to work on day 10 homework. It's been a mighty pleasure teaching you vocabulary today.